Hey y'all, it's Kim. This is going to be video 4 of the deposition of Richard Kahn. He's the accountant for Jeffrey Epstein. He said he didn't know anything about it till much later, blah, 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 whatever Epstein was up to. Yeah. Anyway, a lot of these people are just deny that they know him. And then it comes out, I guess, in the Epstein files that they had a closer relationship. Just like I saw something earlier today, and it was talking about Darren Endyke, who's the attorney, I think, for Epstein. He actually put him as the godfather of his children, but then he said during his deposition that they didn't have that close a relationship. Well, you don't put somebody as a godfather of your children unless you have like a deeper relationship. Just saying. He's also one of the executors of Epstein's estate, and that's another set of videos I'll be doing probably next week because these take a while since it's 5 hours and then 6 hours respectively. This one's five something. I think the one with Darren Endyke is like six. So anyway, let's go and get started on this because we'll set it for an hour and then go from there. Anyway, just give it a moment. Oh, it's so slow. Could be my internet though.
You're back on the record. Good afternoon, Mr. Kahn.
Good afternoon.
There was a discussion in the previous round about loans that Mr. Epstein extended to you at various points in time. Were any of those loans documented?
Yes.
So loan agreements exist for each of them?
Yes.
Have those been produced to the committee?
I don't know. If requested, everything was provided. So it's just a function of what the committee has asked for.
Thank you, Counsel. I would like to refer you back, if I could, to what was previously as Exhibit D. That is the email thread you were discussing with Congressman Walkinshaw. And if I could refer you to the second email down on the first page, that's the page Bates numbered, or ending in the Bates numbers 1286, sent by an unidentified individual on the subject of Gleon at 606 EDT. Do you see that?
Yes.
And I'm just going to read it into the record. Dear Mr. Kahn, thank you for your help.
Let me fix this volume. It's not loud enough. And I forgot to do this before. So give it just a second. Yeah. I'm not in a big fancy studio, so I'm just like in the bedroom. But I want y'all to be able to hear it better. Let's play. Sorry, I know that's interrupting, but
help with the university application. The next step will be the student visa application, in which I'll also need your help. There are certain details that I'll need to present to the consul, and then itemizing those details. The third sentence down reads a sponsorship letter that says you're willing to pay for my tuition on the terms that I'll be working for you in the future. A full scholarship, parentheses, a fake one, obviously. Mr. Kahn, what is your understanding as to why the sender of this email was describing the scholarship she references as fake, obviously?
I don't know what she's referencing to. I believe she's asking for some sort of letter that she says is a fake letter. And I never wrote such a letter that she requested.
And then I'm looking up above at your email to Mr. Epstein, forwarding her email. And the text reads, please advise, if okay, then it appears I should be using HBRK as sponsor, question mark. Is that correct?
That's what the email says, yes.
Okay. And in that email, you don't raise any concerns about the reference to a fake scholarship in the prior email, right?
Yes, it's correct that I don't make a reference to a fake scholarship because I would never write such a letter. So I don't need to tell Epstein that I'm not writing a fake letter. I would never write a fake letter for this individual.
Well, that's not what you said in your email to him concerning this email, though, is it? You're asking him to advise on what you should do.
No, my understanding of what I wrote is, if okay, to sponsor, should it be HBRK? My understanding is that Epstein had asked for HBRK to pay for this woman's education, and I believe she required documentation. I believe that HBRK was going to be the individual, I guess the entity that was paying, and that's what she's asking for.
But you're not drawing his attention in this email to her use of the words "a fake one," obviously, or raising any concerns with him regarding those words.
Yes, that's correct, but I did not need to raise the concerns regarding what she deemed to be a fake letter, because I would never write such letter, and I never did write such letter.
I'm also going to ask the court reporter to mark as Exhibit E an email from you attaching an invoice from the law firm Kirkland and Ellis dated December 18th, 2007. The email is directed to the email address jeeproject@yahoo.com. Do you see that?
Yes.
And was that an email address that Jeffrey Epstein used?
In 2008, that was the proper address for Epstein's email.
Okay. And as I understand, it's your testimony that you didn't learn about Mr. Epstein's legal case in Florida until you had a conversation with him regarding it in 2000. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Could I draw your attention to the invoice attached to this email, that you attached to this email, and in particular the entry on the last page referring to matter of DOJ investigation? Do you see that?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Did you read the invoice before you sent it along to Mr. Epstein?
When I received the invoices from Epstein, and he gave me the authority to pay it, I was not reviewing Epstein's legal invoices. And in the majority of the time, I never received the details other than a summary statement.
But did you look at this invoice?
The invoice that he sent 18 years ago? You're asking if he remembers?
Yes.
I don't
the
recall.
invoice referring to a DOJ investigation.
I don't recall what this invoice relates to. That he sent for October 31st, 2007.
Right. That's all right. I just want to make sure the record is clear. Yeah. Did you read this invoice when you received it?
When you say, did I read the invoice?
Yes.
What I'm looking at appears to be a summary page with an amount due.
Yes.
So when I would receive this,
sure. You just keep interrupting. Let him just finish.
Easy. Sure. That's fine.
When I would receive this invoice, what I would do is take the amount that was due, and if there were multiple invoices outstanding, send it to Epstein, which looks like I sent him previous payments and say, here's an invoice, here's what you previously paid. Shall I pay this invoice? That's usually how I would handle a situation like this.
So again, I don't want to be pedantic. I just want to make sure we have a clear record. I understand how you're describing your regular practice, but I'm asking about this specific invoice that I'm showing you in Exhibit E.
I'm aware of what you're asking.
Okay.
You keep asking, did I read the invoice? And I keep telling you, when I receive an invoice on behalf of Epstein or a legal bill, usually I only receive a summary statement. And at the times when I do receive detailed invoices, my focus is on getting the amount at the end of the invoice to be correct and making payment for that invoice. I have Epstein's approval. I don't need to read the invoice. Or no, I would not be reading the details of his invoices.
So it's your testimony that you did not read this invoice.
It's my testimony that what you're showing me, okay? And again, I don't know if this was the whole email chain. It's my testimony that I received this invoice and I'm asking Epstein, please advise on attached invoices. So the first question I would pose to you, is this a complete set of documents? Because I'm referring to multiple invoices. And here, we only see one invoice. So I don't know what else was in this email. That's number one. The second thing is, I'm saying to Epstein, here's old invoices that are owed from Epstein, and here's what you've paid him so far. Please give me some guidance. That's what I'm doing here in this email.
And the entry that we're discussing does refer to a DOJ investigation in which Kirkland and Ellis was serving as outside counsel, right?
I don't know what Kirkland and Ellis is representing Epstein on.
Turning back, if I could, Mr. Kahn, to the issue of Mr. Epstein's bank accounts, just getting a little bit more specific. Did Jeffrey Epstein ever have any accounts at HSBC?
I don't recall. He may have, but it would have been before my time.
Did you become aware of HSBC dropping Mr. Epstein as a client?
As I said, I'm not aware if he had that account, so I wouldn't be aware of them dropping him.
Well, you were his accountant. Was it not part of your role to track his bank accounts?
What I just testified is that I don't recall Epstein ever having an account. And I said it's possible he may have had an account, but that account was open and closed before my time. So I'm not aware in 2005 when I started that Epstein had an HSBC banking account.
I will represent to you that according to the Wall Street Journal, an HSBC account that Mr. Epstein held in France was terminated. Do you have any recollection of that?
I don't have recollection of Epstein's Paris bank accounts. Epstein's Paris banking and bill paying was handled by a legal firm in Paris, so I'm not aware of the accounts that he had. But it's possible he may have had an account. I just don't know.
Did you ever become aware at any point in time that HSBC had dropped him?
No.
It's also my understanding that JP Morgan Chase dropped Mr. Epstein as a client in 2013. Is that right?
Yes, JP Morgan dropped Epstein as a client, and I believe 2013 was the year, but I don't know 100%. The time frame, it could have been 13 or 14.
What is your understanding as to why JP Morgan dropped him?
I don't believe that I ever received an explanation. Let me rephrase that. I know I never received an explanation, and I don't believe that Epstein or others received an explanation.
Weren't you curious?
I didn't receive an explanation. I don't believe that banks give explanations when they drop clients.
Did you ask them any questions?
Did I ask Epstein questions?
JP Morgan.
When they dropped us, no.
Did it cause you any concern that the individual who employed you had been cut off by a major financial institution?
The transition from JP Morgan to Deutsche Bank happened quite seamlessly. It was the same account rep that went from JP Morgan, his name was Paul Morris, and then went from JP Morgan to Deutsche Bank. Paul Morris switched firms and then brought Epstein's accounts over. So I wasn't concerned. He had a new banking relationship, and there was no red flags to me that JP Morgan dropped him. I didn't know why, but I knew that a new bank was taking his business. So as he said to me in 2013, was it concerning? If he never opened up another account, I would say yes, but he quickly had another banking relationship with the same individual that was representing him.
So let me be a little bit more specific. I understand that you didn't have concerns, as you just testified, about the transition from JP Morgan to Deutsche, but did you have concerns about JP Morgan's decision to drop him as a long-time client?
I did not know Epstein's relationship with JP Morgan and the individuals that he dealt with at the bank. Nor was I a signatory, nor was I ever told. So I don't know the details of why they dropped him. So I can't testify to that. But so it's hard to testify that I was concerned when I don't know the details of what actually took place.
In November of 2018, the Miami Herald published a series of articles about Jeffrey Epstein, his crimes, and allegations by additional Epstein survivors. Were you aware of that Miami Herald series?
I did see the article and I did read parts of it, yes.
Um, did that series cause you concern?
Yes, it did cause me concern.
Why?
Because the Miami Herald article, from what I recall reading, provided more details regarding Epstein and his earlier pleading to soliciting a minor for prostitution.
It's been reported that in the wake of the Miami Herald series, additional banks, including Deutsche, dropped Mr. Epstein as a client. Is that right?
Yes, I believe that Deutsche Bank dropped Epstein shortly after that article.
And what other banks?
Deutsche Bank is the only one that I recall.
Just quickly returning to the issue of your compensation of things of value that Mr. Epstein paid. As I understand, Mr. Kahn, you were married.
Yes.
And you were married during the time that you were employed by Jeffrey Epstein.
Yes.
Did Mr. Epstein ever make any payments directly to your wife?
He never made any payments directly to my wife. However, the entity that received loans was owned by me and my wife.
I'm sorry, what was the name of that entity?
I believe it was called Co2 Enterprises.
COATUE.
CO, maybe UTE.
Again, sticking with the topic of bank accounts, and I don't want to make you repeat yourself. I think this will touch upon some questions that have been asked previously, but just in the interest of a clear record, I had some follow-up questions. And just most generally, am I correct in understanding that you were an authorized person on Epstein's bank accounts?
I don't know what the technical term authorized person was. I was never a signatory on Epstein's account. So I could never sign a check. I could never sign a wire. And I could never withdraw cash. But what I was able to do was speak to the bank and ask them if I needed a bank statement. Can you please email me a bank statement? So I believe I had what I would envision as inquiry status, and that was the extent of the authority that I had with JP Morgan and with Deutsche Bank.
What about other banks?
Those are the two main banks that I recall Epstein having relationships with during my time.
So did you have the ability to effectuate payments from those accounts on Mr. Epstein's behalf?
No.
Did you ever open bank accounts for women connected to Jeffrey Epstein?
No, I never opened bank accounts for women. However, a few women, I do recall, once asked if they could open up a bank account, and I don't recall if it was the women or Epstein asked if we could use our private bank, either at Deutsche Bank or JP Morgan. So I may have requested, or Donna Klein may have requested an application that was then passed off to these women for them to fill out and complete. So it was basically these women were getting a benefit of his private banking service as opposed to having to go to a branch.
I'm going to ask the court reporter to mark as exhibits F, G, and H 3 checks that I'd like you to take a look at, please.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Kahn, first of all, is that your signature on each of these 3 checks?
I don't believe it's a live signature. I believe it's an electronic signature.
These checks are all made out from the entity JSC Interiors LLC, and I believe in an earlier round you referred to JSC as a design company.
I don't recall if I testified to JSC being a design company, but that is accurate what you said. JSC
Okay.
Interiors was a design company that was used by assistants of Epstein in order to have access to the design district in New York, as well as obtain a sales tax certificate for that purpose, so that if Epstein wanted his assistants to pick up samples or do any decorating to assist him, they would have access. So JSC Interiors was a design company. I believe what I testified to earlier was that there were only 3 accounts where I had signatory authority. And what I said is the 3 accounts up until Epstein's last 6 months, where I did have signatory authority on a few accounts. And what I said, and I believe I testified to, was that it was HBRK, it was JSC Interiors, and for the time that I was a trustee on Butterfly Trust, were the only 3 times that I had signatory at Epstein's Deutsche Bank or JP Morgan accounts.
And when was JSC formed?
I don't recall the date of when JSC Interiors was formed. However, I do recall that the previous design company was a company called SLK Designs that was owned by Sarah Kellen. And when Sarah Kellen was no longer working with Epstein, Epstein wanted to have another design company that would allow him access to the design showroom and stores, and JSC was the company that followed SLK Designs.
And did JSC provide services to anyone other than Jeffrey Epstein?
I believe that JSC Interiors was solely set up similar to HBRK, where it was employees of Epstein's assistants. That design was one component, but they also, were assistants. So if Epstein asked his assistant to go to the grocery store, they weren't saying, "I'm a designer, I can't go to the grocery store." So design was one component of what his assistants performed as a task.
And do you know what these payments were for?
Yes, these payments, if you look at the checks, it actually says payroll check on all of these checks, payroll check date. These were checks that were cut from an outside payroll company, and they represented checks to, looks like 2 individuals that were on JSC Interiors payroll.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It is my understanding that Jeffrey Epstein also bought gifts for women on various occasions. Were you aware of that?
I was aware that Jeffrey Epstein bought gifts for women, men, and scientists, and all sorts of individuals, not just women.
Were you involved with effectuating those purchases?
On rare occasion. there are certain instances he might ask me to get involved. It's not one of the things that I quite frankly enjoy doing, but on occasion I did make a purchase of a gift for individuals.
Were you ever aware of Jeffrey Epstein buying lingerie or sex toys for women?
No.
I would like to ask the court reporter to mark as Exhibit I, a November 18th, 2018 email thread, of which you are a part. For the record, it's a thread between yourself and Leslie Groff. Who's this mentor? Of course.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. So I'm going to start from the bottom up just to go in chronological order.
Okay.
So that's the email that Leslie writes to you at 7:06 p.m. on November 18th. You see that?
Yes.
Okay. And it starts, "Hi, Rich. I would like to send this out tomorrow morning to the recipients." What is your understanding as to why Ms. Roth was sending you this email?
My understanding of this email chain, all 3 pages, is that Epstein wanted to buy gifts for, I think it was over 40 individuals, men, women, assistants, employees, scientists, attorneys. He wanted to buy everyone the Apple Series 4 watch.
So at the end of her email, she writes, "All good for me to send, question mark." Was she asking for your sign off?
No, I never approved this purchase. I never initiated this purpose. I think I was involved for 2 reasons. One, I believe that Bella Klein was going to be responsible for payments of these watches, so that if we saw, making the assumption these watches were $1,000 each, and I saw a $40,000 bill come in watches, I would be aware of what that purchase was. But Epstein was the one that decided to make these gifts to these individuals, along with who the list consisted of.
If I could refer you to 2 emails up. So this is the email that Ms. Groff sends to you at 7:30 p.m. This is on the second page of this exhibit.
Yes.
See that?
Yes.
And she writes, second sentence, "Also, are you positive that it was to get the watches?" You see that?
Yes.
Who is?
I don't know.
It appears that Ms. Groff understands that you know.
She says, are you positive it was Epstein may have had known 2 women that were named, I don't know if she's saying, are you positive? And so maybe, when I was with Epstein, he gave me a list of the names that he wanted, but I don't know the context of why she's asking. But my inference from this is that Epstein knew two women that were named, and she's asking which one.
She's asking you.
Yeah, she's asking me because I believe, and I can't say with certainty, that I had a meeting with Epstein and he had told me that he wanted to buy gifts of Apple Watch Series 4 for 40 individuals and started to dictate a list or gave me a list. And his name must have been on the list. And I must have just written the word. And she's asking which it is. And I believe I'm saying I don't know.
And then looking at your reply to Ms. Groff at 7:32 p.m. I looked Friday and do not have
Is referenced on the previous page as, do you have an email from Scott Link's assistant? But I don't know who is. That's the only reference I have from this email, but I don't know who is.
Why don't you explain who Scott Link is?
Thank you. Scott Link was one of Epstein's attorneys.
Thank you. And then the second sentence in that email, I believe maybe Bella can verify. What was the source of your belief that was?
I believe that I had seen her name in the gift report, before we filed the gift tax return with her name. So that was the name that I was most familiar with, and I assumed that he had given her gifts in the past, and this was another gift that Epstein was giving to that woman.
Nothing else on this exhibit. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will ask quick reporter to mark as Exhibit J on the June 8th, 2018 email thread between yourself and Mr. Epstein. So looking at the first email, the one from Mr. Epstein to you at 5:30 a.m. It reads, send redacted, I'm assuming that word is Dosh, 3K euros by PayPal and the same. Do you recall Mr. Epstein giving you that instruction?
I think above on the first one, that below one is right. Please confirm this.
It may be both, because the subject says, I don't know. I don't recall this email from 8 years ago, but I see it today, and I see that Epstein's asking to send money to, appears to be two individuals.
What was he instructing you to pay 3,000 euros to these individuals for?
From what I see from this exhibit, I don't believe I have an explanation. So this would be a perfect example of Epstein asking to send money to an individual, and we do not know what it relates to. So we put it in the gifts account, and it goes on Epstein's gift tax report.
And then looking up above at the second email, you read, please confirm that. Which I take to be his surname. Do you know who that individual is?
I don't. I would have received that information from Bella Klein, who makes payments and records the ledger, and just communicating information I have for Bella. But no, I do not know who that individual is.
And the second sentence, per Bella, redacted name, is traveling to Russia, and she was unable to reach her. Why is that something that Bella would have known, this individual's whereabouts and travel to Russia?
I don't know.
No more questions on this one. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll ask the court reporter to mark an additional document as Exhibit K. This is an email thread dated May 15th, 2018.
Thank you.
And I'm looking specifically at the first page. My only question on this one pertains to the email at the top.
Okay, just give me 1 second.
Sure.
Bless you. I'm ready.
Actually, I'll start on the second page. This is information provided seemingly in connection with an inquiry regarding an LSJE account at Deutsche. And I'm looking at the line entry for March 29th, 2018 payment of $25,000 to an Amar Siad. Do you see that?
Yes.
Who is Mr. Siad?
I do not know who Mr. Siad is.
And then I'm looking at the first email on the first page, which addresses that question. The response from Stuart Oldfield: Amar Siad is a professional photographer. Does that refresh your recollection as to who Mr. Siad is?
Yeah, I do recall. I recall this inquiry in particular, and I believe I referred to it in the previous session when I was asked if the banks ever made inquiries. And I think I referred to this specific transaction, which was the wire on 3/7/2018 for $25,000. The individual's name was redacted, and I said it was a Spanish name and it was for work on his barge. So yes, I do vaguely remember this email exchange and the inquiries. So in this example, just to provide some context, I was able to look up through the books and records the first payment of $25,000. So I did not know what the other three payments were for. I then told Epstein the first one's for the barge. Could you please let me know what the other three payments were for? Yeah,
I appreciate that. I'm focused specifically on the payment to Mr. Siad.
Okay.
And just referring you back to the explanation at the top of page 1, noting that Mr. Siad is a professional photographer. And my question was, did that refresh your recollection as to who Mr. Siad is?
I do not know. I've never met Mr. Siad, and I only know his name from this, or let me rephrase that. I'm most familiar with his name from this transaction. And when I was asked who he is and what is this for, and he was a photographer and he received a loan. So yes, I do recall these transactions.
Were you aware of Mr. Epstein using the services of a professional photographer?
Was I aware of that he was using? I don't know what Epstein, I don't know. As I testified earlier, I was not in Epstein's personal world, so I don't know what Epstein did with photographers or what he did with his personal time. I sat in my office and accounted for his books and records, so I have no knowledge of what he did in his personal life.
I'm going to shift gears to a different topic now. It's been reported in the Wall Street Journal and I believe elsewhere that you had a role with respect to marriages that took place between certain women connected to Jeffrey Epstein. Is that right?
Did I have a role? The reporting on the marriages in the Wall Street Journal, I believe, is inaccurate, but I did write a letter on behalf of two women at their requests. So I could talk about that, but I don't believe the reporting in the Wall Street Journal is accurate.
Which women did you write that letter for?
At the request of Jennifer Kalin and Karina Shuliak, I wrote that letter.
Who was that letter addressed to?
I don't recall. It might have, and I don't know if my recollection is from seeing articles like the Wall Street Journal. It might have been to immigration services, but I don't recall. Yeah,
It was not. They can show it to you.
okay. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
And had you known those two women prior to writing the letter?
Yes.
For how long?
Since my employment. No. Jen Kalin, I believe, was working with Epstein when I began. And Karina maybe came, I don't know, 4 to 5 years after I began.
Did you play any other role in connection with any other couple, female couples that were married?
Well, I'd like to just rephrase your question. I never played a role in any couples and their marriage. I never committed immigration fraud. Let me finish, please.
It's not my question, though.
Okay, I want to speak.
You insinuated something that was not true, and he's just correcting the record.
And you're
It's a
also,
yes or no question.
but you're referring to an article where I believe the reporting was inaccurate. Okay, so what I'd like to set the record straight with is these two women made a request and asked if I would do a favor and write them a letter of recommendation. These two women provided me with a form letter and later came to my office and advised me on sample lines that I should include in the letter. I agree that the letter was embellished. I saw the letter as no different than me writing a co-op recommendation letter for a friend who I had not seen in 10 years. And I write in the letter how great his kids are, and these are kids that I never met. So the letter was embellished. I did it as a favor and as a request of these two women. These two women never told me that this marriage was a sham. These two women never told me that this marriage was forced. I will tell you, in hindsight, I regret writing this letter because I now know that I unknowingly contributed to these women's pain and suffering. But this was not me participating in immigration fraud, and it's been misreported on, and I'm happy that you allowed me to set the record straight.
Just make sure I understand what you mean when you say that the letter was embellished. Are you saying that the characterizations of their relationship that the letter contains were the women's rather than yours?
Yes, the letter, when I clearly look at the writing today, 10 years or whatever it is after the fact the letter was written, anyone, at least Dan and Joshua, could attest that is not my writing and those are not my words.
Shifting to yet another topic. Mr. Kahn, are you familiar with the entity Enhanced Education?
Yes.
What is Enhanced Education?
Enhanced Education is a foundation that Epstein created. I believe it's a U.S. Virgin Islands foundation. And Enhanced Education, I believe, is the DBA for maybe the proper corporate name. That was the J. Epstein Virgin Islands Foundation. I'm not sure which is the DBA. I think Enhanced is the DBA, but it's the same entity.
Did you have a position either in enhanced education or the DBA?
I don't recall if I was ever an officer of that entity. I may have for a period of time, but my position would have been, just making sure, like I did, whether I was an officer or not, that if the foundation was making out checks, that it was a proper 501c3, or if it was a proper expense, how we reported, and if it was something that was not a 501c3, I would report that to Epstein and say that this is not a proper deduction.
Did Epstein ever recruit any women to work for enhanced education?
I believe Epstein had a communications director for a period of time that was paid as a consultant, yes.
Who was that person?
I believe her name was Svetlana. Well, her last name is with a P. I don't recall her last name.
And was Svetlana Russian?
I don't know where Svetlana was from.
I will ask the court reporter to mark as Exhibit L a letter apparently signed by you on enhanced education letterhead dated July 25th, 2014.
Thank you. Yes. Okay.
Mr. Kahn, did you write this letter?
Yes.
And who was it written for?
Don't recall the woman's name, but I recall it was written on behalf of a woman who had previously traveled with Epstein to visit Mr. Bill Gates in Seattle 3 or 4 months prior to this letter being written.
Who was the intended recipient
of this letter?
Yes.
I don't recall, but if I look at the letter in the 3rd or 4th line, it says, please help accelerate the visa. So I don't know the legal authority that deals with visas, but I assume that's what it relates to.
Did you ever meet the individual who the letter was written for, meaning the person whose name was redacted at the beginning?
I don't recall.
And were you asked to write this letter?
Yes, I was asked to write this letter after it was explained to me that Epstein and this woman had went to visit Bill Gates in, I believe it was March of that year in Seattle. And this woman was desiring to do some charity work in Africa. And that Epstein reached out to a medical doctor that was once affiliated or worked for Gates' foundation, and had asked if this individual could help source some work in Africa, as this woman was desiring to do some charity work in Africa. And I believe that the woman and the medical doctor had a conversation, and that they decided that this was the program that this woman was going to go do some work for in Africa.
And who explained that to you?
I believe it was Epstein.
The letter states, and I'm looking at the second sentence, this work is critical to our continued operations in Africa. Did enhanced education have operations in Africa?
Enhanced education did not have an office in Africa, but I don't know what work or charitable donations it was making related to charities in Africa. So I can't answer what it was doing in Africa. The only thing I know is it did not have an office.
Did you do anything to verify the representations in this letter beyond receiving information from Mr. Epstein?
Epstein telling me that this woman and him visited Gates in Seattle, and Gates's medical doctor speaking with this woman and mapping out a plan. There was nothing that was suspicious. There was nothing about this letter that spoke of sexual abuse or sex trafficking. There was nothing for me to question. Everything seemed, proper to me.
Nothing else on this exhibit. Thank you.
Thank you.
A few follow-up questions. I know you covered this in the prior round with the majority concerning Mr. Epstein's use of various business entities. Again, just want to make sure that we have a complete record here. How many entities did Jeffrey Epstein own in whole or in part?
I think this is another area where the media has misreported. I think Jeffrey Epstein at any given time owns somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 30 entities. I don't recall even what the media reported, but they talk about 50 or 100 entities. And they talk about other terms through to ask about, which is incorrect as well, financial maneuvers, financial scaffolding. I'm happy to talk about that if you'd like.
Sure. So I'll start with just the number that he utilized. To some observers, 20 to 30 seems like a lot. What was the reason that he had?
I'm happy to walk you through almost all that I could recall. He had 5 homes.
What's the, I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. Epstein had 5 homes. Each of the homes were owned in a S corporation that tax reported to the IRS. Each of the homes then had an entity that paid the bills and expenses of that entity, in addition to the payroll of the employees. That right there is 10 entities. Epstein had, I believe, 3 or 4 aircraft at any given time, between planes and helicopters. So now we're at 14. Epstein made investments, and each investment would go in a separate entity. Epstein had 2 trusts that we spoke about earlier. Now we're at 16. And I could go on and on. I don't recall all of his entities, but every one of his entities was set up. There was no financial scaffolding. I don't even know what that term means. There was no reason to hide anything. Everything was reported on the books and records, and the majority of his entities were tax-paying entities. Therefore, every income, most of his households, there was no income, there was only expenses, but all of the expenses were reported to the IRS. There's nothing we were trying to hide.
Correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm understanding correctly, specific entities were set up to serve specific purposes related to Mr. Epstein's expenditures. Is that fair?
Each of Epstein's households had an entity that paid the bills and payroll for those households. Each of Epstein's planes also had, expenses. I don't believe that planes had payroll. So yes, every entity that Epstein set up had a purpose. Some of them, were not a business purpose because they were for personal use, but they were all, in my mind, every one of his entities was a legitimate entity. There were no sham entities.
I'd just like to quickly walk through some of those specific entities that we had an interest in. The first being Southern Trust Company. What was Southern Trust?
Southern Trust was the entity that Epstein used for his financial, tax, and estate planning. It was a U.S. Virgin Islands entity.
And did Southern Trust ever make payments to women?
Not that I'm aware of.
The Butterfly Trust you spoke about earlier, and I know you've answered questions regarding that entity. What was its purpose?
I don't know what its purpose was, but the Butterfly Trust, as I testified to earlier, was a pour-over trust from an investment that Epstein made, and the proceeds from that investment went to the Butterfly Trusts, whereby I was a trustee for a period of time, and then I was not a trustee for many years.
Did the Butterfly Trust make payments to women?
Yes.
And did you handle those payments?
Again, I think this is another area that was misreported on. I believe that it was reported that I were responsible for millions of dollars for payments to women from the Butterfly Trust. I think the Butterfly Trust only had approximately $1 million of distributions, number one, and I was a trustee for a portion of time, probably for less than half of those distributions. So yes, at times, as trustee, I made distributions based on the beneficiaries in that trust, yes.
And then LSJE LLC.
LSJE LLC was the entity that paid the bills for Epstein's two islands, LSJ and GSJ.
And did LSJE ever make payments to women?
Yes, I believe that improper payments were made to women from that entity. And what I mean by that is, for whatever reason, I don't know, Epstein asked to make a payment from that entity. It was incorrect. And because it was on an entity, LSJE LLC, that was not a tax reporting entity, we were forced to make journal entries and take those personal expenses and put it on his personal books and records so that it could be properly reflected on his gift tax return.
And then, as I understand it, again, please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Epstein also had a personal account at Deutsche Bank in his own name. Is that right?
Yes, Epstein had a personal account.
Did he make payments to women out of that account?
Yes.
I think that's all helpful. I think the question arises if, as you've told us, each of these entities was set up to serve a specific purpose, and as I understand the goal of efficiency, why were payments being made to women from several different entities, which, as I understand, were designed to serve different purposes?
Well, I'll speak first to the trust. The Butterfly Trust had no specific purpose. It was a trust that Epstein set up for the benefit of wherever the beneficiaries are. So I take Butterfly Trust out of that. In the three entities we went through, I don't believe that Southern Trust ever paid women. And in the example of LSJ, I am telling you that I believe Epstein made handfuls of payments improperly to women from that entity. Why he chose to do that, I don't know. But I do know, as his accountant, of my goal and desire of keeping meticulous books and records, we quickly journal entered those entries into Epstein's personal QuickBooks account so we could properly record for his gift taxes. So from what you asked, it appears that there was one entity that he improperly paid women from other than his personal account.
When you say improperly, can you explain what you mean?
I mean by improperly meaning that it was a personal expense. It had nothing to do. I don't want to misspeak. It possibly could have been. Again, I never traveled with Epstein, so I don't know if he was paying a woman for work she did at that property. Maybe he had a party and this woman was a server. But if that was one or two times, maybe that's okay. But if it was 20 or 30 transactions, that doesn't seem to be the case. So we took all those. I'm not saying the payments weren't proper. I'm just saying the payment should have been from his personal books and records, because that's where he made his personal payments. And that is where that's the entity we used to report his gift tax reporting.
We can go off the record.
Okay, we will go back on the record. It is 3:15 p.m. Mr. Kahn, in the previous hour, I believe you touched a little bit on Mr. Epstein's banking relationships, and I just want to go back through some of that just so that the record is clear. JP Morgan Chase was the primary bank until they dropped Mr. Epstein in approximately 2013. Is that accurate?
Yes,
And can you just restate the reasons for JP Morgan dropping Mr. Epstein as a client?
I believe what I testified to earlier was I did not know the reasons why JP Morgan dropped Epstein as a client.
Have you subsequently learned any reasons for why JP Morgan dropped Mr. Epstein?
Possibly as co-executor, I learned that they were concerned about him being charged with soliciting a minor, and they were concerned about cash withdrawals. But a lot of the reporting, I'm not sure what to believe and what not to believe. I don't know what's accurate, but I did hear they dropped him because of suspicious cash withdrawals, and I believe they were concerned. I think I'm saying this in context of just scarily that maybe I read reports that he was the only reason the bank stayed on with Epstein, but I don't know what's accurate and what's not accurate.
And following JP Morgan dropping Mr. Epstein, which banks did Mr. Epstein primarily move over to?
Epstein moved pretty seamlessly from JP Morgan to Deutsche Bank for his main banking relationship.
Did most of his entities also move to Deutsche Bank for their banking relationships?
Yes.
Did you play any role in finding a new bank for Mr. Epstein at this time?
In 2014, I was not involved with Epstein's move from JP Morgan to Deutsche Bank.
Who would have been involved in that?
I don't know if anyone other than Epstein was involved. As I testified earlier, Paul Morris, who was Epstein's account rep at JP Morgan, had moved over to Deutsche Bank, I believe prior to him being dropped. I don't know how much before. And then when Epstein was leaving JP Morgan, he took in Epstein's accounts at Deutsche Bank.
And how long did Mr. Epstein bank with Deutsche Bank?
I believe he banked from 2014 and Deutsche Bank, I believe, sometime in November or December of 2008, decided to terminate their relationship with Epstein.
2018.
Thank you. In November or December 2018, decided to terminate their relationship. However, for a handful of so accounts, they allowed us some time to find a new banking. So what I'm testifying to say is that the last bank account at Deutsche Bank might not have been closed until March or April of 2019.
And at which point did you take on a more prominent role in the banking activities of Mr. Epstein?
Well, after Deutsche Bank had dropped Epstein, he had asked if I could assist in trying to find him a bank account. At the time, as I testified to earlier, we had 20 or so entities with probably 10 or so payrolls, and I was concerned about making sure that staff was paid and bills were paid. At that point in time, I live on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, and I went to two local branches, two brokerage accounts that are a block away from each other. Fidelity Brokerage and Charles Schwab. And I believe we opened up brokerage accounts at each of those institutions. And this was, I don't recall the time frame, sometime probably in March or April of, maybe April, sometime in the first or second quarter of 2019.
At this point in time, did you move any of Mr. Epstein's money into your own personal accounts?
My own personal account? No.
Are you aware of Mr. Indike moving any of Mr. Epstein's money into his own personal accounts?
I'm not aware, but I can't say that with certainty. I don't know.
And you testified, actually, let me go back for a second. for the course of your time working for Mr. Epstein, can you provide a total number of bank accounts in which you would have had?
Richard Kahn personally,
No, of Mr. Epstein had.
a total number of accounts at all institutions.
Correct.
I would say that his main banking relationship would have somewhere between what I was describing before, or of his entities, planes, personal investments, somewhere between 25 to 30. And I know he had one account in the U.S. Virgin Islands. That was the first bank. I believe he had a local account in Palm Beach for a period of time. Most of these local accounts were for the purposes of the house managers, so they could access checks. And I believe he had a local account in New Mexico. So I would say the most accounts he ever had at any given time was about 30. Approximately.
How many accounts did Mr. Epstein maintain, bank accounts did Mr. Epstein maintain overseas?
The only accounts that I'm aware that Epstein had overseas were his Paris accounts, which I am not 100% certain whether they were in the name of Epstein or the local attorney. I think some of them were in Epstein's name, because I do recall his FBARs, which is financial reporting we're required to do with his personal return, that he had to state the highest value. So he must have had a few accounts in his name, but they were all, my understanding is his accounts were all from Paris, and they're related to the support of his home there.
Mr. Epstein maintained any bank accounts in Switzerland?
Not that I'm aware of.
Grand Cayman Islands?
Not that I'm aware of.
Did Mr. Epstein ever hold any Bitcoin or other digital assets?
Not that I'm aware of.
Going back to the Paris bank, do you know the name of that bank?
I believe there were a few banks. I think it was maybe BNP Paribas. The minority was talking about an HSBC account. I don't know if that's accurate, but they were talking about that earlier. And there may have been one other, I don't recall.
You mentioned earlier, I believe, around the earlier time frame of you coming into employment with Mr. Epstein and moving towards his problems with JP Morgan. He had problems getting credit cards. Is that accurate?
When JP Morgan dropped Epstein, we struggled to get credit cards, and I don't know the particular reason, but I believe it's one of two things. One, Epstein spent a lot of money on an annual basis, and typically wanted credit lines of $300,000-$400,000 because he wanted to give out 10 or 15 credit cards to employees. And I believe that banks wanted full-time. They didn't want to provide just credit card services for that amount of credit without a full-time banking relationship. And Epstein was already settled at Deutsche Bank, so he wasn't looking to move over his banking relationship. And the other reason, and maybe I'm making an inference, is that maybe he had trouble with his credit cards because of his 2008 incident.
And outside of just the plain property management staff, approximately how many other individuals would have access to Mr. Epstein's credit cards, whether that be direct access to his own account or an account in their name that maybe he paid for?
I'm not sure I'm understanding you. You asked me how many credit cards were outstanding, or how many people would
how many people would have a credit card
other than property managers?
The property manager,
What about the pilots?
pilots,
Including pilots, or are you just asking for assistance?
including pilots, assistants, other women, women associated with other businesses, etc.
I believe, and again, I don't recall that much about the JP Morgan credit cards, but I believe back then we probably had between American Express and I don't know if JP Morgan was Master or Visa, but between JP Morgan and American Express, there were probably 15 or so credit cards outstanding.
And who were they besides the property managers?
They were the pilots. When you use the word property managers, are you referring to also staff of the properties?
Yes, outside of staff.
Outside of property staff, it was the pilots. I think at one point in time, Maxwell had a credit card. And his assistants, I would assume. That would be what gets me to 15 in my head.
Did any other women associated with other entities have credit cards paid for by Mr. Epstein?
I apologize, I'm not sure I'm understanding your question. When you say other credit cards, are you referring that he's paying their personal credit cards?
Correct.
Not that I'm aware of. I believe that Epstein, for assistants that made purchases on behalf of Epstein and also made personal purchases, I believe that all the credit cards were originating from Epstein.
Did you track all of Mr. Epstein's credit card payments?
No, that was an area that I was not involved in. That was Bella Klein that handled credit cards, which is, each month when a credit card statement came, Bella Klein would communicate with the individual, whether it was a property manager, assistant, or pilot, and request backup for each one of the charges. And then she would take that backup with the explanation and input that into QuickBooks.
Did you have access to any of the expense reports generated by the use of those credit cards, or is that also Ms. Klein?
I was not restricted if I wanted to see a report, but I never looked at the reports. It was not something that I worked on. So to answer your question, yes, I had access. There were no restrictions, but it was not something that I worked on.
And just to be clear, the property managers at the Palm Beach residence, Little St. James residence, the New York residence, and the Zorro Ranch residence all had credit cards that they could use.
I believe
Mr. Epstein.
I believe Paris as well.
In Paris.
Yes. Now, depending on the property managers, yes, and then depending on how much work some of the other individuals did, there might be additional credit cards given to others at that property.
We discussed, I believe, much earlier in the day that Mr. Epstein was at one point in either late 2018 or 2019 looking to buy a property in Morocco. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate.
And is it fair to say that Mr. Epstein had already set aside the funds to pay for, I know he didn't ultimately end up paying for that house, but he had the funds set up to pay for that purchase?
Just to clarify a little bit, the property that Epstein was pursuing in Morocco, I don't know if the ultimate property that he was pursuing, sorry to go back. Epstein, in a previous meeting with me sometime in 2018 or 19, showed Endyke and I a picture of a home and said, I'd like to buy this home one day. So I knew he was pursuing a property. I don't know if the property that he made an initial payment to the broker for was that same property, but I knew Epstein had an interest in Morocco, and I knew he had visited there previous times. The Charles Schwab account where the wire came out of, had plenty of funds in the account. I believe the account, I don't know which account in particular it came out of. I know we had 3 accounts there at the time. I probably had, I don't know, $50 to $70 million among the 3 accounts. But I will say, I did see an article that alluded to the fact that Epstein made a wire, and then we asked for the wire to be returned, which is correct. I believe that wire was maybe 2 days before his arrest, somewhere in that range. Or I don't know, maybe it was a week before. He retracted that wire. He then asked for a second wire to be made, and I believe it was reported on that he didn't have the funds in the account, which I don't believe is correct. The bank would have never allowed money to go to Switzerland without funds in the account. Maybe it didn't come back in clear, but Epstein held stocks and securities and cash. He had plenty of funds in the account, so I don't believe that reporting was accurate. But then after Epstein was incarcerated, let me rephrase that. One wire was made, it was retracted, and then 2 or 3 days before Epstein's arrest, he made a second wire. And after his incarceration, he requested that that wire be returned back to Charles Schwab, or maybe I personally made the request. He didn't want to purchase that home anymore, and the money was returned. And there's no money in Switzerland, and all the money went back to Charles Schwab.
Are you aware of if Morocco has any extradition treaty with the United States?
I'm not aware of which countries have extradition.
Did Mr. Epstein ever mention countries with extradition treaties?
That's not something we ever spoke about.
I'm going to introduce as Majority Exhibit 4 email. We'll wait a second until it is passed out.
Thank you.
This is an email with the Bates number of EFTA 02125060. The 2-line is redacted. It is from a Janine Brennan, sent on Wednesday, October 30th, 2013. The subject line reads, "Heads up to expect a call from Mike Marvel." In the original message there at the bottom of the page, this is an email that appears to be from Ms. Groff, as the signature line says, "Thanks so much, Leslie." Is that accurate?
Yes.
And just above that, the email states, and I quote, "Mike Marvel from Bank of America will be calling to speak with Jeffrey, but you need to connect the call to Rich Kahn. Rich has been speaking with Mike as, in quotation marks, Jeffrey. Please do not bother Jeffrey with this." Did you impersonate Mr. Epstein in speaking with Bank of America?
I don't recall this email, nor do I recall conversations with Mike Marvel from Bank of America.
Did you ever have discussions with Bank of America?
I believe, I thought I dealt with a woman by the name of Karen Weiss. I believe that Bank of America was the relationship where Leon Black had his accounts. And maybe there was conversations between Epstein and Black in regards to Epstein setting up accounts, but that's my only recollection of dealing with Bank of America.
I will introduce as Majority Exhibit 5 another email. I'll give it a moment for that to get passed around. This is an email Bates stamped EF TA 02120271. The to line is Leslie Groff. The from line is Richard Kahn. Was sent on Wednesday, November 27th, 2013. Subject line reads Mike Marvel, Bank of America. It appears that the signature line has your name, Richard Kahn. Is that correct?
Yes.
The email says, and I quote, I left him a message as if I was JEE, left a redacted number for him to call. If he does, please forward to me. Thanks. JEE, is that often referred to as Mr. Epstein?
Yes, JE is Epstein.
And did you call Bank of America impersonating Mr. Epstein?
I don't recall the particular conversation as we sit here today, but it looks like from this email, that's what it says.
Would you often impersonate Mr. Epstein when dealing with entities or banking institutions?
No,
Can you recall any other times in which you would have impersonated Mr. Epstein in
No.
dealing with his matters?
no.
You recall impersonating Mr. Epstein on this?
I don't recall impersonating Epstein ever, but the email says I left him a message as if I was JE. So those are my words, but I don't recall a conversation. It's possible it happened. I wrote something, but I don't recall the conversation.
Would you have ever done that without Mr. Epstein's permission, or?
I would never. My inference from this email is that Epstein had asked me to speak to the bank on his behalf. I would have never impersonated anyone without their permission. So I don't recall this fact pattern, but I can tell you that I never impersonated anyone unless Epstein asked me to say, call the bank and say to Jeffrey, but I don't recall the conversation.
Are there any other times when Mr. Epstein explicitly told you to call and discuss matters as if you were Mr. Epstein himself?
Not that I recall.
Switching gears a little bit, in the previous hour, some of the entities owned by Mr. Epstein were discussed. I believe you testified last hour that you believed every single entity was a legitimate entity. Is that a correct characterization of your testimony?
Yes.
And you had no concern over any of these entities whatsoever?
Yes, I have no concern over any entities.
Looking back with the subsequent knowledge you have since learned, do any of these entities present any red flags to you sitting here today?
Looking back as co-executor and knowing what I know now, I still don't see any red flags with Epstein's entities.
A lot of Epstein's companies held pretty high cash balances. Was there a reason why they held such high balances?
If you don't mind, could you give me context to when you say his companies held cash balances? Epstein spent a lot of money from a lot of his entities, especially properties where he was doing construction. So if I'm understanding you correctly, if it was an entity that was a household and he was going to have bills and construction projects over the next 2 or 3 months, instead of sending wires every 2 weeks, we'd send a wire one time, possibly for $500,000 to pay for the next 3 or 4 months' expenses. But if you're referring to his brokerage accounts, Epstein made all of his stock and bond investments on his own. I never offered him advice. So I don't know what his thoughts were on investing in the market or other entities.
Were there any conversations or discussions about a maximum amount of money, to hold in any entity?
Not that I recall. You're asking the question, did XYZ entity have to hold $1 million in cash at a certain point in time?
Yes.
Not that I'm aware of, but I do know that sometimes banks, require companies to hold a certain amount of money in cash so that the banks could have the use of that money and pay very low interest rate. But I'm not aware of any arrangements like that.
Were there any discussions or conversations about a minimum balance to hold in any of these entities' accounts? With the understanding that, of course, banks often have thresholds, but outside of that.
I believe, whatever the bank would require, we would keep in order not to pay fees, but I'm not aware of minimum balances at all, no.
You recall the entity named Nautilus and Poplar?
Nautilus and Poplar, I believe they were title holding entities. I believe Poplar was for the Virgin Islands residents, Little St. James, and Nautilus, I think might have been New York title.
And were you the treasurer or otherwise affiliated with any of these entities?
I believe I was an officer for his entities, yes. For that entity, for the tree company entities, yes.
Do you recall the entity named Cyprus?
Yes, I believe Cyprus held title for his New Mexico property.
And were you an officer of Cyprus Inc.?
I believe at a certain point in time, I was the treasurer. I don't recall the dates.
And do you recall a entity named Maple Inc.?
Maple Inc., or maybe Maple owned New York, maybe Nautilus owned Florida. I'm not sure, but Maple Inc. was another entity that was set up for the sole purpose of holding title to one of Epstein's residences, yes.
And were you an officer of Maple Inc.?
I believe so, at a certain point in time.
Are you familiar with a company named Laurel Inc.?
I believe Laurel Inc. was the title holding company for his Florida residence.
Were you an officer of Laurel Inc.?
I believe so.
And speaking about these title holding entities we just discussed, but you indicated you were an officer at one point or another with all of them. What was your role in being an officer for these title holding companies?
My role as an officer would be to make sure that the bills were paid, the property, in these title holding companies, that the property tax bills were paid and that they filed timely tax returns.
Did these entities have any other obligations outside of the ones you just mentioned?
My understanding of these entities is that they were set up, they were USVI corporations, and they strictly held title to Epstein's residences, and the only bills that they paid on an annual basis were property taxes or maybe some filing fees, but that's all I understood that these entities did.
Are you familiar with Gratitude America?
Yes.
And what is Gratitude America?
It is a U.S. Virgin Islands foundation that Epstein set up with the goal of giving money to scientific purposes as well as to the ideals of America.
You an officer or any otherwise way affiliated with Gratitude America?
Yes.
What was your role?
I believe I was treasurer, and at one point I was president as well.
And given those roles, what were your responsibilities with Gratitude America?
With Gratitude America, similar to the three entities we spoke about, my goal would be to make sure that Epstein was giving donations to 501c3 entities, make sure that he was properly filing his tax returns, and making sure that the books and records were accurate.
Are you aware of any funds being paid by Gratitude America to any women for unrelated purposes than the stated purpose of the entity?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Are you familiar with MC2 model management?
Yes.
And what is MC2 model management?
It is not an Epstein-owned entity. However, it is an entity that was owned by John Luke and I believe a few other partners. That was a modeling agency that Epstein gave a credit line to. Or, let me rephrase that. that Epstein backed the credit line. I believe they obtained a credit line from the bank and Epstein guaranteed it.
And how much was that guarantee?
I believe at one point it was up to $1 million.
And why did Mr. Epstein provide a guarantee to the modeling agency?
I don't know.
And who is Jean-Luc Brunel?
I believe he was one of the owners of MC2 modeling agency.
Are you aware of what Mr. Brunel's relationship was with Mr. Epstein?
At the time, I assumed they were friends. I didn't know their relationship, but subsequently I've read articles that said that they were friends, and so recent articles that said Jean-Luc and him had a falling out. So,
did you ever meet Mr. Brunel?
I probably met him a handful of times, coming or going from a meeting, but we've never had any substantive conversation.
Did you ever process any payments from Mr. Epstein or his entities to Mr. Brunel or MC2 Model Management?
Process payments meaning?
Did you send any money in any form?
I believe at one point in time, Epstein asked if money could be sent on behalf of, it may have been Svetlana. That's all I recall.
Do you know what the purpose of the money for Svetlana was that was provided to MC2 Model Management?
No, I do not.
Do you have any concerns about Mr. Epstein's relationship with MC2 Model Management and the young women that were associated with it as well?
I never met the women from MC2 modeling agency. The extent of my relationship with MC2 was as Epstein's accountant when the credit line was extended to the agency. I was making sure that it was paid down and paid off over time. So my dealings were predominantly with a gentleman by the name of Jeff Fuller, who I believe was Jean-Luc's partner. And I would ask him the status of payments and make sure that they would be able to pay down the credit line so that Epstein didn't have to pay on that guarantee.
Are you familiar with Roadruck Investigations?
Yes.
And what is Roadruck Investigations?
I believe it's an entity that we used when we hired new individuals, employees, rather, I'm sorry, to run background checks.
Did you hire Roadruck Investigations to perform background checks on every new employee or new hire?
I believe so.
Was this PI firm used for any other purpose other than background checks on new hires?
I got the name of Roadruck from either Epstein or Endyke, so I don't know what their previous relationship was with this organization.
Are you familiar with the entity JEGE Inc.?
Yes.
And what is JEGE Inc.?
JEGE Inc. was an S corporation that was set up to hold Epstein's Boeing 727 aircraft.
Did it have any other purposes other than holding the Boeing 727 aircraft?
It held title to the aircraft and also paid the expenses on operating that aircraft.
Were you involved with JEGE Inc.?
I was involved in a bookkeeping capacity. I was involved if the pilots were doing renovations and they needed to pay for the work that was being put in place, making sure that the work was proper. So I would communicate with them on projects related to the plane, but that was the extent of my involvement.
Mr. Epstein the owner of that entity?
Epstein owned 100% of that entity, yes.
Are you familiar with JEGE Inc. owns the 727? Is that correct?
Yes.
Mr. Epstein also had another aircraft. Is that correct?
I believe he had two planes.
Damn it.
Most times, he also had a Gulfstream, I think Gulfstream 2B originally, and then sold that and bought another Gulfstream. Yes.
And which entity of Mr. Epstein's held the Gulfstream?
I believe originally the Gulfstream 2B was owned by Hyperion Air Inc., another S Corp. And when Epstein sold the Boeing and sold the Gulfstream 2B, he bought maybe a Gulfstream 4 or 5, I don't recall. I believe
Okay.
that was owned by JEGE LLC.
Mr. Epstein also owned a helicopter. Is that correct?
Yes.
And which entity held the helicopter?
Epstein owned many helicopters over the years. One of the first helicopters he owned, I believe, was owned by an entity by the name of Air Len Inc. When that helicopter was sold, I think he owned 3 or 4 helicopters over the years, and I believe some of the later helicopters were owned by Hyperion Air LLC.
A lot of these entities, they have similar names. You have JEGE Inc., JEGE LLC, Hyperion Air Inc., Hyperion LLC. What is the purpose for having entities that are named similarly, but not being the exact same entity?
I don't know the process of how Epstein names his entities. Quite frankly, from my perspective, a lot of them were weird names, including the tree companies, but that's irrelevant for today. Epstein, what I do know is that Epstein held one asset in each entity. So for the time that Epstein owned 2 planes, they would never be held in the same entity. When Epstein owned 2 helicopters at the same time, they were always in separate entities. But I don't know the significance for why or how he named the entities.
Given your years of experience and expertise as an accountant, do you find that strategy to have similarly named entities as strange?
I find nothing suspicious about having the same name of an entity. I mean, from working as an accountant with real estate developers and property owners, many times they'll call it ABC1, ABC2, ABC3, and they'll just keep continuing a name they like and adding a number for each property they buy. So I find nothing suspicious about that. No red flags.
Did Mr. Epstein own any boats or seafaring craft?
Yes, he owned a number of boats and jet skis at his U.S. Virgin Islands location, LSJet.
And which entities would hold those boats and jet skis?
His barge was held by an entity by the name of Shell's Transportation, LLC. And he never owned a yacht. I think most of his boats were just to transport workers back and forth. It might have been owned, this might be the one circumstance where he did not put boats or aircraft in a separate LLC, but from my perspective, it wasn't significant in the fact that these boats, I don't think any boat that Epstein owned was more than $50,000 or $100,000.
And understanding that Mr. Epstein likely owned many cars over the time that you worked for him, which entities would have held the various vehicles that Mr. Epstein owned?
Epstein typically held his cars by the entity where the car was located. So, for example, in New Mexico, for a period of time, it was Zorro Development that operated the ranch. It then became Zorro Management. So those two entities owned his cars over time. In Florida, I think very early on, when I first started working, Epstein owned cars in his individual name, one or two cars. But thereafter, he owned it in the entity Neptune LLC. Little St. James, the cars were owned, I believe, I don't think there was, I mean, it was an island. I think there was only one car, and it was owned by his business, maybe Southern Trust or Financial Trust. New York would be the same. NES LLC would own, I think it was one or two vehicles in New York. And I believe the same goes for Paris.
And which entity in Paris?
I think the entity that Epstein held title to his property in Paris was an entity by the name of SCI, is the name of a corporation that he held shares. I believe he was in a co-op there, owning multiple apartments. But I don't know if that entity held the cars or if he held them individually there. I don't recall.
Understood. Are you familiar with Zorro Trust?
Yes.
And what was the Zorro Trust?
Zorro Trust was the original entity that held title to the ranch. So before Epstein used the tree companies to hold title, he held title differently for all of his properties. And prior to, I believe Cyprus held title at Epstein's death. But prior to that, Zorro Trust held title to the ranch, and Zorro Development paid the bills, owned the cars, and did the operations. After that, title was held by Cyprus Inc. and Zorro Management paid the bills.
Are you familiar with 116 East 65th Street LLC?
I believe that was the entity that Maxwell owned her townhouse in.
Do you have any role with that entity?
I had no role with the entity other than the fact that I testified earlier that I helped her organize her finances. So potentially that entity had some of her staff that were on payroll, and I may have helped her organize, her finances with and understand her payroll, but I had no involvement with that entity in setting it up.
And so that entity was owned by Ms. Maxwell?
I believe so.
Are you familiar with EGC Capital LLC?
I don't know that entity.
Are you familiar with Forums LLC?
Yes.
And what is Forums LLC?
Forums LLC was an entity that was set up by Maxwell and funded by Epstein. And Forums LLC was involved in the 2005 Clinton Global Initiative. I believe that Forums had some sort of profit sharing with the entity that was putting that event together, which was called Publicis. I believe Publicis was producing the event, whatever that event was, I don't know. But Forums invested money and was in some sort of profit sharing agreement with Publicis. And I don't know anything more other than the fact that when I first began working with Epstein in late 2005 and later in 2006, I remember reviewing the financial statements from that event for the profit and loss of the Clinton Global Initiative.
Were there any other entities that were involved with the Clinton Global Initiative or Clinton Foundation?
I believe that Epstein made a $25,000 donation to one of Clinton's foundations in 2006.
Do you know which entity that came from?
I believe it was COUQ.
Are you familiar with J. Epstein and Company, Inc.?
I'm not that familiar with that entity. I believe that was in existence prior to restarting, and I feel like it might have ended either right when I got there or before, but I think it was an entity. I don't know. I'm sorry.
Are you familiar with Lynn and JoJo LLC?
Yes.
And what was Lynn and JoJo LLC?
Lynn and JoJo LLC was an entity that held real estate.
And what real estate did it hold?
It was a home in Valley Stream, New York.
And whose home is that?
I believe Epstein owns the home, but it was occupied by Lynn and JoJo, his housekeepers and driver. Thank you.
Are you familiar with enhanced education?
Yes.
And what is the role of enhanced education?
Enhanced Education was also known as the J. Epstein Virgin Islands Foundation, and it was a U.S. Virgin Islands foundation that made donations. I don't know its proper business purpose of what it registered. I wasn't involved or around when it was originally set up.
Are you aware of any payments from enhanced education to the Stockholm School of Economics?
Yes, I most recently learned about that as co-executive.
And what did you learn about that payment?
I learned through a litigation that Epstein made donations to that entity.
And did you have a role in processing or wiring that payment?
I don't believe I may have been on an email, but I couldn't have. I would have never initiated the payment because I don't approve payments to charities, and I would have never been able to sign the wire or check. But I may have been on an email where Epstein was asking for money to be sent, or maybe he asked me, and it's handed off to Bella and whoever the signatory was at the time.
Understood. Are you familiar with the Florida Science Foundation?
Yes.
And what is the purpose of the Florida Science Foundation?
I believe the Florida Science Foundation was a subsidiary of Koch Foundation, and I believe that was a foundation he set up that was in place for when Epstein was incarcerated and going to his office 6 days a week.
You said Koch Foundation. Is that
C-O? Yes, C-O-E-Q.
Do you know when the Florida Science Foundation was established?
I do not know.
And you mentioned that it was established during his time being incarcerated in Florida.
I believe so.
Do you know why it was established?
I don't know the purpose of why it was established. No.
Did you have a role with the Florida Science Foundation?
I don't recall specifically a role. I may have been an officer of the foundation, but I don't recall. I know the Florida Science Foundation had employees that were on payroll, so possibly I had a role with payroll, or Bella had a role, but I don't recall specifics. But I know it had a payroll for the people that worked in that office.
Is it possible that you were the treasurer of the Florida Science Foundation?
It's possible, but I don't recall.
Did you process any payments to any women or girls while Mr. Epstein was incarcerated in 2008?
Again, just to clarify, I never processed any payments. I may have been on an email chain where Epstein was asking if someone was going to be paid, but I was never a signatory, nor was I ever had ability to send a wire transfer. Other than, as I testified earlier, the two entities, JS signatories and modified trustees.
Switching gears a little bit, are you aware of Mr. Epstein assisting with visa applications for many young women during your times of employment with Mr. Epstein?
I was not aware during appointment, but I've seen many articles subsequently as co-executor that he was involved with visas for individuals.
Did you review or process any payments in relation to applying for visas for young women?
I don't recall specifics. I may have been asked to pay an immigration attorney. That would be the extent of my knowledge and involvement.
Do you recall reviewing or initiating any payments to embassies or consulates regarding immigration paperwork yourself?
I'm not personally familiar with that.
I'm gonna stop it here. There's about 48 minutes left. That was a long run. But anyway, I'll keep recording videos and just keep uploading stuff because we're not gonna let the Epstein thing die. Somebody said the other day that it was pretty much like the Google searches had stopped for the Epstein because they're worried more about the Iran and Israel stuff, which I am, but I don't know what I can do about it. There's not much I can do about that part of it. I mean, hopefully there's a conclusion to that, but as far as the Epstein stuff, I don't think we're going to get a conclusion on it. But anyway, I will talk to y'all later. Have a good day. Bye.